Okay.
Hi, Irit. Hello.
Hi, Michèle. Good morning.
Good morning. Hello. Welcome everyone to today's live Zoom Q&A session with Professor Irit Rogoff. And thank you very much for joining us here and for your interest in hearing about this very exciting brand new PhD program called Advanced Practices that Irit will be talking about, and in our fully funded PhD scholarship at Goldsmiths. The webinar will be approximately 1 hour. First, I'll ask Irit some questions to get started, and then it's over to you where you can ask any questions into the Q&A box, and then Irit will be happy to answer them or together. Just briefly to introduce myself and Asymmetry Art Foundation, my name is Michèle and I'm the Deputy Director of Asymmetry. We are a newly established London-based independent art foundation that was founded by collector and philanthropist Yen Du in 2019, who, by the way, is also in the audience today. Hello, Yen. And we're dedicated to nurturing and supporting curatorial practice in and about Asia through global exchange. This Q&A takes place within one of our activities, which is the Asymmetry PhD Scholarship, that supports one successful candidate a year to study the full PhD program Advanced Practices at the Department of Visual Cultures at Goldsmiths. Besides scholarships at renowned centers of learning, we also partner with established art institutions in so-called curatorial fellowships. Right now, besides this open call for the PhD scholarship, we have an open call running for a curatorial fellowship at Whitechapel Gallery that enables the fellow to a wonderful residency at Delphina Foundation as well. And we will be launching the curatorial writing fellowship at Chisenhall Gallery later in spring. We also engage in public programming such as conference and lecture series, and we will announce more about these projects soon. If you're interested in our other collaborations, please follow our website and our social media. I will type in all the URL and media handles and links that we will be talking you through throughout this Q&A, so you'll find it in the chat that is accessible to all attendees as well. And now to commence the Q&A. The scholarship at Goldsmiths is aimed at practitioners who are nationals from Greater China, such as China, Hong Kong, Macau, or Taiwan, based anywhere in the world, and will cover full tuition fees of 4 years, travel, rent, and living costs and working costs as well. The open call is running right now, and the deadline is the 15th of March. So for anyone who's interested in applying, there's still a bit of time. However, please be mindful of the approaching deadline. You will find all information on the scholarship and the application process on our website and our social media, and we look forward to your applications. Now, I would like to introduce Professor Irit Rogoff, whom you've come to hear speak today about this new academic venture. Irit is a renowned scholar and one of the initiators of the transdisciplinary field of visual culture and the founder of the department at Goldsmiths. She leads the PhD program Advanced Practices, where she also teaches alongside Bridget Crone and Adnan Madani. Irit works between academic teaching, theoretical writing, curatorial projects, and organizing public study. Some of her research interests range from visual culture, contemporary art and critical theory, post-colonialism, geoculture, cultures of education, to gender studies. She has written and co-written a number of essays and a book, and contributed to various periodicals such as Art Journal, eFlux, and Third Text. Hello again, Irit, and thank you very much for joining us today. We're thrilled to have you here.
Okay, thank you very much, Michèle. And thank you to everybody who's come on the Q&A session this morning. We thought I'd start with a little bit of general context. So one of the things that distinguishes Goldsmiths, which is a university that covers 19 different fields of study areas across the social sciences, humanities, and the arts. So it's a full university with the exception of the sciences. And one of the things that distinguishes it is a understanding of practice that emanates from many, many different directions. So practice is not simply something that is done in the arts. So the sociology department, the anthropology department, the communications, many departments pursue strands of their activity through what they call practice. And practice, sorry, I'm going to have to run off and get a glass of water in a minute, I forgot. And practice is understood as testing certain kinds of questions and certain kinds of premises against different kinds of knowledges and knowledge structures and methodologies. And so practice is much more expansive than making things. Practice is taking questions out of academic disciplines, testing them in the context of other kinds of experiences, other kinds of knowledges, often not academic knowledges. Our program in advanced practices in the Department of Visual Cultures is one of many programs across the institution that deal with practice, but its uniqueness is that it is focused in the arts. Michèle, excuse me for a second, but I really do need a glass of water.
Don't worry at all. I'll just take over here quickly and remind everyone to be mindful of the deadline around 15th of March. For any one of you who are able and really invested in applying for this PhD advanced practices at Goldsmiths anyway, with or without a scholarship, I do strongly recommend you to prepare all the documents to apply at Goldsmiths already as well. We will get to it at a later point, but this is a very important point that Irit and I felt we wanted to emphasize, that you're ready to apply at Goldsmiths as well. Here we are.
Okay, sorry about that. So what I was saying is that our new PhD in advanced practices is a continuation of a program that ran for about 13 years called Curatorial Knowledge, which was a program that thought about the curatorial rather than curating. So whereas many training programs across the world try and prepare people for the professional practice of curating, we trying to take advantage of the kind of very specific area that Goldsmiths engages with. We tried to think about a program that would extend beyond the professional and think about the curatorial as the creation of events of knowledge, by which we mean that whatever is assembled in a space in the form of something public, whether it's an exhibition or some other way of manifesting, that these create events of knowledge, and that what we need to do is be able to attend to more than the starting point of this chain, which are the art objects or the art performances or processes. And so to follow in a rather long line of understanding of how this then kind of impacts with audiences, beyond those audiences, with study, etc. So this was curatorial knowledge. About, I think, 47 people got degrees and have been doing exceptionally interesting work all around the world, whether in academic departments or setting up their own institutions and associations and art offices, or in jobs within established institutions. But they have been exceptionally, I think, bold in their practice, and have realized that where the framework doesn't exist, it needs to be invented. And I think that is maybe one of the greatest contributions that curatorial knowledge gave, is that sense of people having permission to create the context that they need for their work. Now, from that, we've expanded to the notion of advanced practices. And the notion of advanced practices, I think, follows several things. It follows the huge turn to research within the arts. So what might have once been research having once been something that happened in advance of the main event, right? A stage of preparation for something. It is now become really the main event. And so the sort of artists working in research, curators working in research, groups of people using research in order to put forward certain kinds of claims, all of that is really a turn of the last decade. And we understood that this needs to be thought through in a different way. And so we've opened this program, and this program has a fairly simple remit, which is the question, how can we advance the grounds for practice? What does one need in order to launch into practice? So obviously certain kinds of knowledges and skills, but the questions that need to be asked when the arena of practice is opened are questions that really project forwards, and that's the advanced. The advanced is not excellence. It's in no means trying to kind of create a benchmark of excellence. The advanced is moving forward, progressing, anticipating, trying to understand in what way can something be understood in the contemporary. And so to give you an example of this, our MRes and PhD students, this is a postgraduate research program, so it's 2 degrees, MRes or PhD, have been working for the last year and a half in a practice laboratory. This is a session we run every few weeks, and our project has been, can we think about the 1997 Johannesburg Biennial, which was a very distinct event, the sort of first international exhibition curated by Okwe and Wezor, the first international event in the arts to take place after the fall of apartheid. There are many, many, many kind of topical elements that make up its distinction. But we wanted to take this groundbreaking moment and see whether the challenge it offered in 1997 can be carried forward to today. Can we be the contemporary viewers of the 1997 Johannesburg Biennial? And through this exercise, can we try and define what it means to work with advanced practices? Can we understand what it means to be contemporary viewers of anything, a historical or a contemporary event? Can we understand what kind of challenge an event produces for us beyond the encounter with artworks? So to that end, the people have been interviewing all across South Africa, artists who were involved, but as importantly, art handlers, truck drivers, canteen people, packers, the installation people, because this is what one means by the event, right? Take it out of its kind of iconic status as maybe the first major international biennial in the continent of Africa, and create a context for it, which is social and political and cultural and artistic, but then track it, understand what happened to those people, the sort of, how did it change their practice? How has we moved forward? How can we look back at it and see it in a contemporary perspective? So advanced practices really understands practice as a forward journey, and which cannot be anticipated, and in which the actual product, the art world, is not necessarily the final product. There are other processes taking place which move forward and project forward. So that is the Advanced Practices program. Michèle.
Thank you so much for this comprehensive and expansive introduction and sharing ideas and needs behind driving such new developments that have led to these programs, curatorial knowledge, and now, of course, the PhD program Advanced Practices. You've mentioned previously that you're very open to what a practitioner brings to the table, as long as they ideally have some professional experience and also unique ideas and viewpoints. Now, what are you looking for in an ideal PhD candidate or a group of PhD candidates, Irit?
Well, I could be facetious and say we're looking for somebody serious. And in a way, that is the case. But by serious, I don't mean earnest. By serious, I mean somebody who has the capacity to encounter different kinds of knowledges. And that doesn't mean having degrees in different areas, because most of us, because the field is changing so quickly, most of us are self-taught in most things. And so what we're looking for is somebody who has or has given themselves access to many fields of knowledge, to different ways of thinking, and who wants to think of practice not simply as making, but as making a kind of gesture within culture that will link whatever they're doing with what other people are doing. So collaboration and the ability to learn across, kind of divisions that are set up by either disciplines or professional practices are key. We're looking for people who come with a sense of a project, although it does not have to be a finished project. I think it's one of the things that we're there for, is to help people shape their project. So we're looking for a sense of project, and maybe most importantly, that project is sort of underlined in a sense of an urgency, that it engages with the world in some way, that it is able to make links between practices and issues.
Yeah, so in that sense, is it correct, and I'm sure I speak on behalf of the audience as well, that the practitioner doesn't need to come from a set background? It's not only curators, but can be.
Yeah, I mean, at the moment we have we have about 20 people, MRes and PhD students in the program, and they are practicing artists, practicing curators, several organizers, some performers, dance, choreography, scholars. It's very broad. Because the field it's a new field, and the field is coming together. And one of the things we want to be able to do is bring it together. And we bring it together through the people that are collected within that program. The program has teaching by ourselves. Bridget Crone, Adnan Madani, and myself are the course tutors. But it also has this big practice lab, which is a collaborative research project, which will end in a collaborative exhibition and performance lectures series. And so the sort of we see the program and the people in it as actually developing a field, not coming to a completely, predetermined, organized field, but actually building a field.
Sure. Sounds great. Let's get a bit into the detail of a daily life of a PhD student while studying advanced practices. Could you give us insights into day-to-day life of a candidate over a couple of months? What would studying the advanced practices program look like?
All right. So up until the COVID crisis, which we've all been through, are still going through, the program was what's called a distance learning program, which means that most of the participants had jobs and were working either in the UK or elsewhere, and would travel to London every 6 weeks for 3 or 4 days. And we concentrated all the teaching in that way because it was crucial for us to have people who had a kind of an ongoing practice, an ongoing professional practice, which would feed into their research and their work, but also gave us opportunities to kind of go places and try our hand at different kinds of projects through our participants. Since COVID, obviously, we've had to kind of change the format. We've moved to a Zoom teaching. Uh, and we've moved to meeting far more often because people don't have to travel. And I think we're going to keep part of that going because it's been so productive for the program. We've made such enormous strides over this year that I think we're not going to give it up. So part of the program is going to continue on Zoom. But to go back to your question, Michèle, the program, so our program, Advanced Practices, runs every 6 weeks, and it runs across 3 days. The first day is a seminar for the MRes on key concepts. So we've been working on concepts like singularity, supplement, different concepts that people aren't always clear about and that we feel they need a kind of grounding in. Then there are 2 days of the general advanced practice seminar. Normally these are enormously long, 8 hours, but obviously on Zoom we've cut them to 4 hours a day, in which we do some teaching, we read some texts together, and we always have a guest who works in the field that we're trying to look at. So for example, for the last seminars, we've been looking at ethnofictions, at the way in which certain kinds of observed facts give way to the writing of fictional accounts, which we think is very central to practice today. And because it's kind of gripping for all of us, and because there are so many interesting people working in the field, we think we'll probably continue it for at least one more seminar. So there is that, these are the block seminars of advanced practices. For people who are London-based, there's also the weekly Visual Cultures PhD seminar. This is a 2-hour seminar with the entire cohort of PhDs in the department, and they are welcome, we are welcome to join, and they tend to join. What we do is on the Thursday when we have our seminar, they don't have theirs, and they come and join us. The third program in the department is research architecture, and they again do block seminars every couple of months with extraordinary guests, and so we attend those as well. This year, because of Zoom, you know, nothing has required travel, and we've all attended absolutely everything. So then there is, on Thursday evenings, there's a public program in the department, and that's where we try and track the kind of recent trends in thinking, recent trends in practice, recent trends in kind of political organizing, and or organized kind of thematically. And Michèle will share the link. This Thursday, actually, the Advanced Practices program is introducing itself to the department. And Michèle will share the link for those of you that are interested. It's free and open. You just have to register at Eventbrite. So this together makes up the kind of daily life. The hour block seminars, access to the weekly seminar, access to research architecture seminars, access to the public program. Then we have about 9 MA special subjects that I think are really exceptional. And they are open for auditing by PhD students. It just has to be arranged with the tutor of the seminar. Those are a little bit like the MRes seminar. They give PhD candidates a grounding in certain kinds of very current thinking, very current vocabularies that people benefit from having an understanding of, even if it isn't directly related to their sort of research project.
That's really a very wide range of catalogs
Yes.
to offer the candidates. That's great. And
This is sort of before we talk about what's going on in Goldsmiths and what's going on in London. I mean, we always think that London is one of our greatest teaching tools because in normal times there are such extraordinary lecture series and exhibitions and conferences, and people can really, really widen their horizons through the city, as you know.
Yes, definitely. I agree. So, having given an insight into this wide range of offers, and you've mentioned before that it would be great that candidates bring their own ideas that they can expand on. So, speaking about these urgent issues and questions that need to be addressed within your fields, can you tell us more about these themes and topics that you currently engage in?
You mean as a program?
Yes.
Okay, so we decided that this year, because of the way in which we're trying to build a field rather than say, oh, this is the field, we know what makes it up, and we will teach that. We want a field in the making. And so we decided that for the three of us, the people who are teaching in the program, we would come to the table with a series of terms that we think are really important in the field. And then we would use the seminars and invite guests to expand on them. So to just talk about what we were thinking about since the beginning of the year, we were thinking about self-organization. What does self-organization mean? At what moments in time is self-organization something that is really required and necessary rather than just, getting together with a group of like-minded people doing something? So we invited the sort of, there's an organization called Médecins Sans Frontières, Doctors Without Borders. It's a very big organization. It's also quite old. It's been working for about 40 years. So it has a huge structure. So we invited the person who's head of their research department, Michael Neumann, and we asked him, how do NGOs think about research? Because this is our topic, research. We're trying to understand it, but we want to understand it not just through a kind of old model of research. So he played that out. Then we invited Michèle Ferrer, who's a kind of important political theorist, to talk about new social movements that have emerged in recent years. So and this was incredibly interesting, apropos, what we were talking about in terms of urgency. He said that whereas social movements in the past had been preoccupied with improvement of protest and the need to improve something, new social movements at the moment are preoccupied, he said, with life itself, right? So he was talking about Black Lives Matter. He was talking about the sort of various movements against sexual violence. The sort of, he was talking about a range of movements that for him typify this particular moment. The next term we start, the next term we started to look at is ethnofictions, which we're still kind of preoccupied with. And there, what we've been doing is inviting groundbreaking anthropologists who are writing fictions, to speak about the connection between what they see on the ground when they're doing fieldwork and observing, where there are great difficulties, and how they give account of those difficulties, which is no longer simply description, right? It's an attempt to create a world that they can bring the reader into. The next term, the final term of the year, we're going to look at metabolics. Bridget Crone, our colleague, is interested in the notion of metabolics. And so we're going to look at the way, really at metabolisms and digestive systems and the way in which they become ways in which knowledges kind of come together and integrate. And we've found some exceptional museum people doing research around metabolics and medical museums and science museums, artists who are working. So this is how we build the program. We find something that we think is of contemporary kind of urgency, and then we try and furnish it with information, with voices, with work. And this is how we understand advanced practices, that they're kind of advancing in every direction in order to create new fields, right? New platforms of research and interest and making.
Yeah, truly expansive and without limits. Well, while we have you here, Irit, and it's such a great pleasure to hear you speak, we'll be very curious to know what your personal current research focal points are.
Well, it's embarrassing to say that my research is about research these days. I think I understood partly the research turn in the arts, in curating, but in every form of performing and visual arts. But I also understood something, and I think this is where, for me personally, advanced practices is such an interesting umbrella to be working under, because I understood in the last 2 years that what's been happening in terms of research in artistic practice has impacted tremendously on research in the humanities and social sciences, but also surprisingly in research in the sciences, right? So I have conversations with scientists. The Tilly Black, who is the chief curator of the Science Museum in London, said recently in a series of radio talks she talked about, she said, you know, there used to be a distinction between the arts and the sciences. Now the demand is that the arts have to be rigorously investigative, and the sciences have to be, she said, ferociously imaginative. And this is the moment that I'm trying to understand. I'm trying to understand what has happened to research. How has it become something that needs to be done as an ongoing process rather than gathering information in advance of doing something? So research has become a mode of doing. And I'm writing a book called Becoming Research, which is trying to kind of explore something. My main contention in this is that we used to work from inherited knowledges. All of us used to come from disciplines. Each discipline had a body of inherited knowledges. We mastered that knowledge, and then we found a place for ourselves at the end of it to do something new. I think that now we work from conditions. The conditions of our lives are dictating not just what we're working on, but also how we're working. So for example, let's say that somebody wants to work on precarity, on the instability, the economic and other, and now of course also viral kind of instability of our world. You cannot do that through a stable methodology. You cannot approach precarity through stability. You have to develop a methodology that actually echoes the very precarity that you're talking about. Otherwise, what you've got is, you know, what entomologists used to do, which is kind of stick a pin in a bug and, you know, put it on the wall without allowing it to do anything. So this is what I'm interested in trying to track and understand what's happened to research, how its remit has expanded, how we've kind of blurred the boundaries between scientific research and life experience and so on.
Thank you so much for sharing. This is truly remarkable. And I would say so is obtaining a PhD under your supervision, Irit.
It's not just myself. I have remarkable colleagues, and it's a very young, very vibrant, it feels like a very contemporary department, and everybody has access to everyone in the department.
Amazing. On that note, speaking of everyone, what are some of your former practitioners professionally doing today? You've mentioned, that they're very proactive in creating new structures, and advanced practices being such a new program as well. What could possible next career steps and outcomes be after the PhD?
I think that this, for me, that's a kind of dangerous question because the world is so unpredictable now. We're understanding that many of the really small art associations and organizations that had as a task to seed new work, right? To discover people of promise and seed them, because museums don't discover people, they showcase people when they are when they're already kind of developed and have something to show. We understand that these are going to suffer greatly in the financial crisis post-COVID. So it's very hard for me to predict. I don't know who's going to be expanding, who's going to be contracting, what's going to be over the next year we will find out. I think that for me, the big asset of our kind of program is that people have the capacity, they develop the capacity to think about the field, not just about their own practice, and say, my work, my interest, they might fit there. If there doesn't exist, let's get together, a group of us, and create it. And so we have people who, have gone into absolutely established arts institutions. We have, somebody who just finished a PhD, who's the chief curator and artistic director of a big space in Stockholm. We have a lot of those. We also have people who have really invented their sort of work context. So there is somebody who finished a PhD with us, Lara Vergara, who, together with two friends of hers, started an art office. They got a little bit of municipal funds, started doing conferences, publications, exhibitions. Within a period of 2 years, the municipality of Bilbao, which is where they're working, realized, what they have to contribute, have taken them in as an independent art office into the major institution of the city. So they're guaranteeing them an infrastructure and a budget, but they're not taking anything away from their independence to really determine, because they realize that their future, they're future oriented and that they can learn a lot from them. So this is the range. There are people who kind of decided to practice by being organizers, the people who have kind of narrowed down and decided that what they want to do is to make and to write. So a really huge range.
So open. Yeah, great. I would say this is the questions to open up the conversation, and it's been extremely insightful, and hopefully it has motivated everyone to look more into the PhD program even. I suggest now to open the live Q&A for the audience. If you have any questions that you would like to ask Irit in relation to the program, or department, or the university, or want to know more about the scholarship, now's your chance to write into the Q&A box, which you see below. I've also copied all the links, also the event that Irit just mentioned, into the chat that everybody can now see. We have the link to our open call, we have the link to the advanced practices website, and also our URL, etc. So let's have a look at the Q&A. Everybody, please come forth with your questions. Do you see the questions as well, Irit, below, or should I?
I do, and I can, there's a question that's technical about communicating with me. I can reply.
Yeah, while Irit types away. So how this works is we will see the Q&A, the questions, and then we can either open them and answer them, and you should see them as well, or if we dismiss them, you won't see them. Okay, so we have one question. Does the successful candidate's interest needs to be exclusively Chinese contemporary art? That's a great question. I think because this is within the frame of the PhD scholarship at Asymmetry, I will answer this question. So of course, the answer is no. While one of Asymmetry's core missions, or our main core mission, is to enable and facilitate exchange for Chinese and Sinophone, practitioners who identify to a certain degree to being Chinese or Sinophone. We want to facilitate opportunities for them to have more exposure on the international art stage. So while we focus on practitioners from that area, we welcome a vast expansion in terms of research. Of course, historically or from experience, Asian or Chinese practitioners will work with what they have available. They will work with Chinese artists or practitioners or scholars. But I'm sure I speak on behalf of you as well, Irit, that while studying or obtaining a PhD at advanced practices in your course, we strongly recommend the expansion and connecting to wider fields. I hope.
Yeah, can I add?
Definitely.
Add something. It's not about Chinese contemporary art. It's about contemporary. And by contemporary, what we mean, it's never about the objects that one studies. It's always about the way in which you study. What knowledges do you bring together? What methodologies do you want to develop? What kind of questions do you want to ask? What kind of life circumstances can these questions connect with? So we're less concerned with what materials you're studying. And we think that what we can contribute here is to approaches and methodologies. And what is contemporary study? Contemporary study doesn't look at all like historical study. It's not the objects you study, it's how you study them.
Great, this one is done. Then we have someone asking, hi, thank you for this event. Is the successful candidate, do they have to need a curation background?
No, absolutely not. Because we are a continuation of curatorial knowledge, and people know that, they think that that might be the case, but it isn't. What we're interested in is sort of really different practices. So some of them are artistic, but not all of them. And we're talking with an anthropologist now who wants to come and do a PhD in advanced practices. So really the range of what comes in, but it would be great to have people who have some notion of a practice, and the practice can be absolutely eccentric, but also kind of an idea of what they might want or need to know in order to underpin this practice and make it an advanced practice. So it's not exclusively for curators at all.
Yeah, as I've mentioned before. I can see that many people are typing questions into the chat. If you can, please type it into the Q&A box so that everybody can see them. There's one question that asks, can bachelor degrees apply as well?
Right. I think, yeah, the answer is yes. I think what we have the capacity for at Goldsmiths is to translate professional experience into the equivalence of degrees. So we have had a couple of times people with BAs who then went on to do enormous bodies of work in the world and then wanted to come back and do a PhD in order to reflect on all the work that they'd already done and figure out what the next step would be for them. So those are absolutely possible, and we can argue for that. The university is open to that kind of an argument. I think what I would discourage, but not just for this program, for any program, is somebody very young who's just finished a BA continuing immediately to a PhD. PhD is a long and elaborate and often lonely road. and you need the stamina. And I think, if you're 22 and you've just finished a BA, all of which is studied in large classes with other people, you might not actually be prepared yet to do a PhD.
Great answer. So we have a couple of questions regarding the nitty-gritty details about the study and the scholarship, and as well for overseas people to attend. So Cecilia asked, could we keep working in China while distance participating in the program? It seems hard for us to fly to London every 6 weeks if we work in China. And the second question is, could you talk more about the PhD dissertation?
Okay, so I think that part of the answer to your first question, Cecilia, should be in tandem with asymmetry. The sort of, we have both. About half of the people with us are living in London, have moved to London. The other half are flying in every 6 weeks. I agree with you that flying in from China every 6 weeks is extremely difficult. I also am not entirely sure about what asymmetry wants, because if you fly in every 6 weeks for 3 days, you don't get the benefits of everything the university has to offer. So this is one issue. Yeah, I think that was it. And the other question was, could you talk a bit more about PhD dissertation? Were there some graduates who continued to work in academia? Yeah. The PhD dissertation is what's called a practice PhD, which means that I'll tell you what the regulations are. The regulations are that 40% of it's the measure is 100,000 words, right? So 40% of that needs to be written and 60% of that can be practice. You can also change all of I think the regulations are because I think they were at a loss of how to describe a practice PhD. So a formula was invented. In reality, we invent every single PhD with the candidate. The different kinds of PhDs require absolutely different formats. What's happened, I'll tell you about the ones that are the most interesting to me, is what happened is somebody who had a practice, they came and they thought they wanted to reframe their practice, contextualize it differently, and so on. Through the experience of the program, they decided that they wanted to go in a different direction. And so rather than writing about their practice became positioned as the point of departure. And then what they could do is think about how their studies are actually structuring the next phase. So for example, we had somebody who had done a very large exhibition, and about a year into his studies as a curator in a museum, said, that exhibition did absolutely nothing I wanted it to do. And so his dissertation became the first exhibition, then a whole unpacking of the field and the problematics of the exhibition, and then a plan for a second exhibition that would somehow do the first one better and deal with all the issues. This is what I mean by inventing the format. Each project is going to need a slightly different way of working, and we are completely open to it. And in general, the university is completely open to it.
Cecilia, I hope this answers your questions from the Goldsmiths side. Just to quickly expand.
Hang on a minute. There's a third question from Cecilia. Were there some graduates who continued to work in academia? Yeah, there are people actually heading programs around Europe that have to do with research, with practice research, with critical curating. Yeah.
I see. And then just to your first question, Cecilia, and this is probably interesting for a lot of practitioners based in China, for the Asymmetry Scholarship, we definitely, the scholarship is a fully funded scholarship, as mentioned before, and it does cover the person to live and practice and work in London. So throughout these 4 years, it covers tuition fees, it covers accommodation in terms of rent, that is like an allocated amount. So we give you the freedom to choose whatever modes of living and preferred areas you want to choose, but we definitely welcome or hope that the person, or actually it is tailored toward the person coming to London. Now, while we know that right now, due to COVID, Irit has mentioned before how the circumstances are, however, because this is a PhD program of 4 years, we are absolutely positive that the situation would get better. So during study time, the person will definitely be based in London. All right.
There's an earlier question from Carrie Chan.
Yes, Carrie. There's an optional requirement for sample of an academic publication, 500 to 1,500 words. Does it have to be a journal article? Also, is the scholarship for full-time study only?
Okay, so yeah, the scholarship is for full-time study because, and this is to do with visa requirements, the foreign nationals receiving a student visa, it's called a Tier 4 student visa in the UK, have to be full-time. There's no provision for part-time foreign students. About the writing sample, I think we generally prefer something that has been published. But if there's something that any one of you has written that you feel that you want to make public, that really represents you, I would send it in with an application.
Great. Kun Liang is asking, hi, Michèle and Irit, thanks for the session today. I was wondering in terms of application process, if we have to have assigned supervisors.
No, the sort of the way we're teaching the program now, this is a new program where all of us feeling our way around. I think we're having a very interesting time doing it, but we can't sort of establish very hard and fast procedures in advance of feeling our way around. So what we've done is this. We have set up groups of 3 people, 3 groups of 3 people in year 1. And we're doing group supervisions where they're talking about their project. So one tutor, 3 students, and we meet and we unpack their projects and we discuss it. In year 2, we kind of get a better understanding of who would be best to supervise them. So it's not in advance, and you don't have to have someone who has agreed to supervise you. We, the program together, we make all of our decisions about who's coming together. And it's just a question of whether we feel this is interesting for us and whether we have the capacity to actually supervise this. If it's really interesting for us and we don't have the capacity, then we try and get somebody in the university who has the capacity to be second supervisor. So we're like with this anthropologist who's interviewing right now, where somebody from the anthropology department will be second supervisor, and that way we'll make sure that it plays in that field and isn't, like an extraterrestrial that landed there.
Sure. Okay, that is Kun Liang's question answered. We have quite some questions. Somebody is asking, is the Asymmetry Scholarship eligible for someone who already is enrolled in the Advanced Practices program? I believe this is probably a question for us. So we do want to encourage new talent and new practitioners and give them a chance to maybe study overseas and abroad, people who've never come to London before. So as this is a new collaboration with Goldsmiths that starts in autumn 2021, this scholarship project and ongoing collaboration is definitely something for new applicants. Sorry about that. Let's see, there are quite some long questions.
Okay, I can answer the next one, which is Bolyang Shen. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Requirement for PhD graduation. So as I said, the regulations say a written section and a practice section, but what constitutes the practice session is something that we figure out together with the candidate, and what form it takes is we try and invent the absolutely best form for the project, right? Different projects are going to require. I should say something about the examination process. So a PhD undergoes over the 4 years, 2 moments of examination. It's very, very different from the US system, where there are lots of exams and courses and so on. The first one is between 18 and 20 months into the project. It's called an upgrade. And in it, you present 1 chapter of the dissertation and what's called a critical literature review, which is an annotated bibliography. And this is in order to give evidence that you're really reading broadly across fields and so on. And this is a University of London regulation. There we get 2 people from another department, let's say. We're very, very kind of objective. And the sole purpose of the upgrade is to say, can this person upgrade from an MPhil, which is what you register for, to a PhD, which is the degree you hopefully get. After that, the only other moment of examination is the viva after you've submitted the dissertation. And there we have absolutely freedom to choose whoever we want to come into to examine. So we very often have practitioners as well as academics coming in to examine depending on the dissertation. And there you finish the dissertation, and the dissertation can be in the format that the project demands, right? So it can be a visual submission with a written, it can be film work, it can be a lot of different things. We work out how to submit it, and then there's an examination, and the examination is with 2 external, not from Goldsmiths, 1 University of London, any of the 22 institutions of London University, and 1 is, just somebody who is relevant to the work. And there we can really shape it. So what we do is we wait until we really understand what the dissertation is doing, and then we go find the appropriate people, because that's the most important thing, right? We absolutely want to guarantee that we have readers who get it, who get the work.
Definitely.
So I think that answers that question.
I have one here that is quite interesting. From anonymous attendee, could you speak more about the collaborative project that the program facilitates? What shapes did it take in the past? How is it made public?
Okay, yeah, this is really exciting stuff, and I'm working it out now. I don't have definitive things to sort of say. But as I said, we've spent the last 18 months working on the Johannesburg Biennial. They're working in 4 groups. The groups are researching things like the narratives that the exhibition put forward, and then the narratives that have been written about it, the affect that was produced by the exhibition, people who participated, the affect that it's producing in us, the curatorial legacy, different kinds of aspects of the exhibition. So they've worked in groups. We meet every 2 weeks. We listen to what the group is working on. We find new readings that might help them, progress the project. We're planning 3 outings for the project publicly. One is we're part of what's called the CHASE consortium. It's a consortium of 8 departments across universities in Britain that have curating museum studies, practice-based, etc. So we're doing one, and I've put forward a project called The Absent Audience, which has to do with COVID, the fact that institutions have no audiences now. So we are, and of course we are the absent audience of the 1997 Johannesburg Biennial that none of us saw or experienced. And so we're doing a kind of series of performance lectures and slideshows for that. And then we're going to HKW in Berlin and to Bach in the Netherlands to hopefully in the autumn to show the project. If not, we'll do it again as an online platform. So the collaboration is working together. They develop a methodology, they develop a terminology. They kind of present and present again to the group, and we kind of unpack it. And then it comes together in a series of performances.
That's the public element. Great. Here's a great question by Carolina. Thank you very much for this morning's Q&A. Could you confirm what specific background is encouraged for the current capacity of the Asymmetry Scholarship for successful scholarship candidate? I think I will answer this question. So of course, the Advanced Practices PhD program in general welcomes people from all walks of life, no limits there. However, as mentioned before, Asymmetry Art Foundation has one of the core missions. We are an independent-based art foundation based in London. However, we mainly, at this point in time, it's our inaugural year as well, work with practitioners who identify as Chinese or Sinophone speaking and come from Greater China area, which includes mainland China, Hong Kong, Macau, and Taiwan, but are based anywhere in the world. We understand that this also means that it is inclusive to a certain degree and exclusive to some others. However, in terms of these foundations, you will find similar foundations that specialize in regions. And right now, this is one of our core missions. So we encourage people with a background of who identify as Chinese and Sinophone speaking or Greater China at this point in time. We're hoping to expand to Asia, Pan-Asia at a later point, and become more and more international. Thank you, Carolina.
I think Carolina, maybe I've misunderstood it completely, but I thought she was talking about not national or regional background, but professional.
Oh, I see. That's all.
I may be completely
No,
wrong.
I think I agree.
So
that too.
yeah, I think there is no formula here. We haven't worked out a rigid notion of who we want, and we want really interesting, groundbreaking projects. We want people who have the potential, not yet, but the potential to develop a methodology and a way of working. And we want people who understand what it means to be working from conditions where the sort of the events that surround us are somehow the context for the work that we do. There's a question from Eileen Wang.
Yes. You mentioned that most of the candidates have their own project jobs alongside the program. Do you think the program is suitable for someone who has not had years of professional experience except from internships and occasional independent projects?
Okay. I mean, there's no formula and there's no profile that it's really the, how you conceive of your project, what do you think you bring to it. Some people bring professional experience, other people bring insights. I think if you feel that you have a real project, then I don't think you should let this hinder you prevent you from applying. Yeah, I think that
sounds good. I would say we have about max 5 minutes. I know we have a lot of questions to go through. We would reply to these questions after the Q&A as well, but we don't have that much time. So let's look at just a couple more before we have to wrap this up. somebody says, can we do field research based on China?
Yes, absolutely. You do field research if your project requires field research, wherever you need to. And the you know, we can't help facilitate it financially, but we can facilitate it in terms of writing letters, introducing you to people, you know, giving you the backing of the program. So yeah, the sort of I think if I understand correctly what you're talking about, we would not encourage people to miss vast amounts of the program in order to do field work, because we think that the sort of we have something to offer and we'd like people to take advantage of what we had to offer. So I don't think we would sort of encourage people to go off and spend, you know, half the year every year doing field work. At a certain point in discussion with us, field work becomes absolutely necessary, and then you go off and do it. But I would say towards the end of the second year, when you've kind of built yourself an apparatus, a thinking apparatus.
All right, that is Zhao Kunfang's answer, a question answered. And then here I have one that is quite important. Thanks for the session today. I was also wondering, in terms of application process, do we need to make 2 rounds of applications? Firstly, through the Asymmetry program, then through Goldsmiths system.
Okay, so Michèle and I have been discussing this, and I think what we've come up with, I mean, Michèle will confirm because I may be a bit hazy on detail, but basically what we're doing is this: whoever wants to applies to Asymmetry. The department, the 3 of us in the program, are together with Asymmetry, are going to go through applications, shortlist, interview, and make a decision. At which point, we think 2 things. We think that I think it's 4 or 5 a short list.
Yes, correct.
We would ask the people who are shortlisted, and the Asymmetry will let them know. We ask that they get all of their application materials ready, because application requires a statement, a project statement. It requires 2 letters of reference. It requires a CV. It requires transcripts of previous study or evidence of previous work. And it requires beginning the visa process, which is long and arduous and really, really difficult. There's an immigration office at Goldsmiths. It takes you through the whole process, but the process is long and elaborate. So we would ask the 4 or 5 people shortlisted to start getting all those materials prepared. So when the person selected is announced, that they'll be able to expedite the process, because otherwise, because the immigration office tells us that they want the visa application process started 6 months before the person is coming. So we really, really need to get all this going in April. That's why we're going to ask the finalists to prepare all of their material as quickly as they can.
Exactly, that's all correct. And then in terms of dates, just you have some context, as mentioned before, the application deadline for the scholarship through Asymmetry's channel is the 15th of March. And jointly with Goldsmiths, we will create this short list of candidates for interviews, and they will be invited for the week. So the interviews will take place just a week after. But during that time, we will communicate with them to remind everyone to prepare for the formal application at Goldsmiths as well, just to prepare for a great, smooth application process, so that we can, by the end of March, basically select the successful candidate and announce it in April. So yes, it's 2 rounds of applications. All right. Irit, do you have any?
There's a question about English language requirements. Somebody who has graduated from an MFA in the US.
That will have to be the last question, I'm afraid,
Yeah,
live.
I think They require, I think, a grade 7. If you have a degree that you completed in English and that degree had a written component and you sent the dissertation component is part of your application, I think we could probably argue that an earlier English language certificate would be enough.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for the questions. We unfortunately don't have time to answer all of them live here, but we will get back to you via email. And then I see that you've typed into the chat. I will just copy all the links once again, especially drawing special attention to the event that takes place on the 25th of February, which is a conversation on advanced practices with the stream instructors.
Yeah, I'm sorry, there's a question there from Kunfang Zhao. And can you simply write to me? It's i.rogoff@gold.ac.uk. It's the standard Goldsmiths email. And you can find me online and just send a message through the system. Because this requires a kind of longer discussion than we can do right now.
Sounds good. All right. Thank you, everyone, so much for participating and listening into our Q&A today. And thank you so much, Irit, as well, of course, for giving your time and insights. I believe we have answered some of your questions, not all of them. We will get back to you. And as mentioned before, application process or deadline is the 15th of March. You can find all the information in the links that I have posted in the chat, be it more on the program or on the scholarship, the event on the 25th, which I really encourage you to listen into because all 3 instructors will be live and 3 practitioners. And it would be very interesting to listen in. And yeah, which is part of the spring public programming at the Department of Visual Cultures, right? Thank you very much, Irit, as well, for joining us today and for your very interesting insights. And thanks everyone for joining. We hope that we will keep in touch and have a great day. Goodbye.